When it comes to shooting games on the Sega Dreamcast, few developers out there, if any, have a knack for squeezing as much power out of this little white box as G.Rev, which was formed around the turn of the 21st century. Already having assisted with the programming of Treasure's Ikaruga in 2001, their first fully in-house shooting game to be developed was Border Down in 2003. Originally released to arcades on NAOMI hardware, Border Down would see release on the Sega Dreamcast the very same year.
Being that G.Rev was formed primarily to make shooting games, they've always pushed the boundaries as to how a shooter is made. Under Defeat, Senko no Ron, Strania, Mamoru-kun Curse, and Kokuga are all great examples, and have all been covered on Bullet Heaven in the past. Being G.Rev's first though, Border Down really set the bar, and in many ways, it's one of the freshest shooting experiences of their catalog. Let's take a closer look.
Border Down has a really neat system at its core, called the Border System. The Border System basically represents 3 separate craft known as Wasps, each with their own separate paths through each stage. If any of these ships are destroyed, players take control of the next craft in sequence. Depending on the stage progress, players may start at one of 3 stage section checkpoints when taking control of the next border.
Starting a game with different borders also affords the player more flexibility and wiggle room to see the end of the stage in question, depending on which one is chosen. Border Green gives the player 3 ships, Border Yellow 2, and Border Red only 1, meaning that if your ship is destroyed, it's game over, man. This system isn't exactly for the weak-willed either. Border Down is considerably harder with each subsequent border chosen. With lower ranked borders though, at least dying and going to the next one doesn't ramp up the difficulty.
It is well worth your while to practice all of Border Down stages to get the best feel for how each one flows. It's far from bullet hell. Border Down isn't even really considered manic, especially given the time of its release. However, despite this, Border Down is still extremely difficult thanks to swift, tiny bullets that can sometimes have a tendency to get caught in our blind spots. Even with reduced difficulty settings in the main menu, Border Down is, by design, a very hard game to make efficient progress in unless you know the ins and outs of every stage you play, regardless of border. Another thing to note is that collision with environmental objects doesn't kill you right away, but you'll still bite it if you collide directly with enemies or their emplacements. Handy sample plays can be unlocked for each stage to see what the best approach is.
The extreme challenge will surely have most players on the ropes, but controlling the Wasp won't be why. The typical 8-way movement complete with variable speed settings is sharp and well balanced. The bullets may be hard to track, but weaving through them all is pretty easy. If a player bites it, it's all on them. With the hitbox of your Wasp being the small glowing cockpit, there is a ton of room between even crowded bullet patterns. But that's not all. Alongside the neat border system is quite the interesting weapon system.
Holding the fire button enables a standard rapid shot, while tapping it will fire homing shots in conjunction with a considerably weaker rapid attack. This system also borrows heavily from Taito's Metal Black. The main cannon's power grows at a steady rate to a maximum level of 5. The main shot's power is indicated in the laser level gauge on the bottom of the screen, and enemy kills also fills this gauge considerably. This gauge is used to engage a supercharged brake laser attack that makes quick work of, well, everything. Even enemy brake laser attacks. Most importantly though, all enemy attacks can be nullified with this technique. Care should be used though, as when the gauge is depleted past a certain point, players have to go through a cooldown period before it can be used again.
Defeating specific enemies or destroying certain emplacements around the stages you'll be flying through will release energy pickups that will increase the laser level gauge considerably. This is helpful in boosting the score or getting to certain foes through walls in key areas with the brake laser. These pickups also appear after shifting to the next border just to make sure that, at the very least, its cannon is, at worst, somewhat effective. That's not saying a lot though, as the regular and homing shots up through level 4 aren't especially effective, especially against larger enemies.
Using all 3 different types of attacks effectively and as tactically as possible is more or less critical to player success. Again, making sure to practice each stage to understand and anticipate the enemy opposition for an even better tactical advantage will absolutely help in making it further in Border Down. Thankfully, for players who may not have the skill to surpass the deceptively difficult gameplay in Border Down, more credits open up the longer you play, though this can take a considerable amount of time.
If you do end up biting it at some point in a stage, there is also an interesting approach to extends. Achieving a specific score on the stage you are in allows players that may have bordered down to choose another path. This is helpful if the next stage's remaining borders are too extreme for them, or if they want a stiffer challenge. Thankfully, learning to hit the normal score requirements reveals a scoring system that's pretty fun. More on that in a bit.
Border Down is a pretty tough game to be sure, but for those that want more to this game, a highly challenging remix mode is also available with new enemy formations and a much steeper normal clear score, which is perfect for the hardest core borders and super diehards. There are two main mechanics that make up the scoring in Border Down. In addition to enemy kill score, a multiplied score can also be applied depending on the number of enemy kills and bullet cancellations accumulated when using the brake laser. This multiplier resets when the brake laser ceases, but with careful timing, swift movement, and a good understanding of where the most dense bullets are, huge scores can be obtained, sometimes in the millions.
These multipliers also make up a cumulative hit score that is displayed on the Dreamcast controller's VMU screen when it is used. This hit counter applies to a stage-end bonus that contributes heavily to the score, especially when the number is high. The amount of time taken to destroy the bosses in Border Down can also lead to a decent bonus as well.
Each stage also has a target score that, when achieved, allows other borders to be selected between stages if a higher or lower difficulty is desired. This target score is also higher or lower depending on which border is selected, as is the base score value. Border Yellow has a double base score value while Border Red has a triple score. Naturally, the increased challenge makes achieving the normal target score more difficult.
One interesting facet to the scoring in Border Down is that the total score does not reset when a credit is used, so some pretty big scores can result on the local leaderboards. Purists can turn the credits all the way down to just 1, making for what would be more widely accepted as a pure score.
The score system is mostly an easy, simple one that ends up being pretty fun once the core game has been mastered for survival. After all, it's wicked satisfying to get that 100 hit multiplied 10,000 point bonus, especially after wrestling with a huge enemy brake laser. One area in which G.Rev has always shone is in their game's presentation, and since it was a NAOMI Arcade game, Border Down is definitely no slouch in the design, visual, and sound departments.
With a solid 3D polygonal graphics engine, Border Down has visual impact to spare, and all at 60 frames per second for the most part. There are going to be times where the frame rate will stutter when the biggest, grandest explosions happen, or when there's an overwhelming amount of chaos, but 95% of the time, it's all at 60. With great explosion and weaponry effects, including an awesome Dragon Ball-style laser clash when brake lasers collide, there's never really a dull moment visually.
The mechanical design is pretty awesome stuff too, especially in the case of Border Down's bosses. With an awesome attention to detail like small accents in the ship's detailing and exhaust, and even cool environmental effects like fiery debris from huge machinations making landfall on highways and alternate bosses in the backgrounds, the visuals really pop at all times. The stages even change depending on which border is selected, sometimes at different times of day, other times in different locations. There are times though that the backgrounds may be a little on the confusing side when it comes to which parts of the level will kill you.
Complementing the great visual design, the sound design is also cut above with fantastic sound effects and soundtrack composition. Every shot, laser, missile, and explosion is exactly what you'd expect from an epic shooting game, and that's what you'll find throughout Border Down. The audio cues for the laser level is also clear enough to peek through the rest of the chaos so that players don't need to constantly check its status amidst a hail of enemy gunfire.
The OST here is also pretty great stuff and, once again, sets the bar for everything that G.Rev would follow up Border Down with. Composed by Yasuhisa Watanabe, who also worked on Metal Black, the music in both arcade and remix modes sets the stage with quite a few standout tunes that are often quite daring when you factor in the jazzy and orchestral pieces. The intro piece in particular is also pretty snazzy.
Maybe best of all for English players, all of the story bits are in full English with Japanese scrolling text, so nothing is lost plot-wise. All in all, Border Down works extremely well with the kind of hardcore gameplay that shooting veterans will love, paired with a slick presentation and simple but rewarding score system. But how does it stack up? Let's take a look.
The controls in Border Down are sharp and well balanced with no input lag issues.
Weapon and speed controls are also quick and intuitive.
Border Down is deceptively hard, deriving its challenge from small, fast enemy fire rather than typical bullet hell mechanics.
The border system also ramps up the challenge in ways that will definitely hold back novices.
With 6 stages and several paths and bosses thanks to the border system, there's plenty to play here, even without the hours and hours of practice you'll need to get through.
The Dreamcast exclusive remix mode adds double the gameplay for players that need even more challenge in their Border Down experience.
Everything in Border Down is incredibly polished visually, with awesome design and detail. Bullets blending in with the backgrounds can be a problem though.
Bullets are often so small that they can sometimes drift into people's blind spots, which can make for cheap deaths.
Border Down has some truly great sound with a standout OST.
The sound effects here are also perfectly selected with none that grate or irritate.
The border system is a truly unique one that instantly makes Border Down stand out.
Despite its strong ties to Metal Black, Border Down still manages to be entirely fresh all the way through.
Dreamcast shooting games are part of an elite group of titles that somehow manage to be mostly great at every turn. But amongst the awesome arcade ports, series origins, and indie homages, Border Down stands out as possibly the most unique take on the genre the system has seen. It may not be perfect, and it may be impenetrable to a lot of players, but it's still definitely a pretty awesome game. Border Down gets a 4.75 out of 5. Here's the stickiest part about Border Down. Its price. With the standard edition being a very limited run as it was, with an even smaller limited edition run, prices are up there. Standard edition copies can range between $130 and $240 depending on completeness and condition. Limited edition copies are considerably more though, starting at $180 and often going well above $200 for complete and new copies. Pricey? More than likely, but for hardcore shooting fans that love them some Dreamcast, more than likely well worth it.
With the hitbox of your wasp being the small glowing cockpit, there is a ton of...
You blew it.